Who gracefully ceded the leadership of this to me. Thank you. He knew something I didn't. Anyway, so I think all I can do really is present some of the basic concepts that different people came up with. I think there is a sort of structure for this that's processing in my head. I'll see if I can get to that at the end. First of all, design management itself, huge subject, a massive subject. It covers all sorts of industries. We're not just talking about the building industry. It could be automotive, it could be space research, it could be software development, it could be any of the creative industries, anywhere where there's some sort of design process going on that produces something to somebody's end user requirements. And it's as simple as that. So it's huge scope. So there's a danger we sort of disappear down some rabbit holes there and just get totally lost, which I think is part of what we did here anyway, but no. So part of it is actually focusing on the outcomes. So having appropriate strategies and processes to achieve the results that you want. So if you're designing a modular social housing block, then the way you approach the design management of that is quite different to a traditionally built office block. So that moved us on to thinking about, well, who is the client? Could be a multi-headed client, the client could be a big business, could be one person. Can we learn from other industries? There's a lot of parallels drawn with the car industry, with the construction industry, but isn't that a bit of a red herring? You know, most of the buildings we produce are one-offs by new teams brought together in new circumstances. We don't have the time to build a prototype, let alone get the building built. You know, so I think there's some red herrings in it. But it's led us to another thing, to think about project teams as knowledge stores or knowledge pumps. Basically, by the end of any project, that team has built up a huge store of knowledge, lessons learned, all sorts of things going on. And then what do? We rip that team apart, send them to 4 other 5 projects, totally different. And all that knowledge, those solutions to all sorts of problems are sort of locked away. And we need to find a way of pumping that knowledge around our organisations. Somebody else raised the point of thinking, well, we need to be looking at design management over the whole life cycle. So from conception to design, construction, in use to the eventual end of the building cycle and recycling. And it involves the entire supply chain. So it's designers, suppliers, installers, manufacturers, constructors, operators, all sorts, maintenance people. Most construction projects, most buildings we have now, will still be standing in 2050, which feeds into the carbon agenda. And we need to be thinking about maintenance and replacement and design life strategies and all that sort of stuff. Somebody else raised the point about benefit realisation. Why are we doing what we're doing? How are we doing it? What are we doing it for? When Bob and I trained to be architects back in the 18th century, it was, we used to talk about long life, loose fit, low energy buildings. And here we are, nearly 40 years later, still talking about the same concepts. But somebody threw in another one, which was, actually, why don't we take the exact opposite of that and design short life, throwaway buildings? So they're short builds designed for short functional use, short-term use, and then totally recycled at the end. And I think it was Elizabeth, wherever she is, raised the point about this is being done in the heritage sector with some success, I think, in different situations, which I thought was really interesting, actually, as a concept. I think there's in design management as a point, I think there's a lot of focus on process and strategy and toolkits and BIM and all sorts of things. But actually, design management is about people. Buildings are built by people. They're not built by BIM, you know, or anything else. You know, it's people coming together, working together. And I think there is some work to be done around the skills that a design manager needs to enable and facilitate all this to happen. You know, whether it's management, whether it's time management, whether it's people skills, facilitation, enabling, mediation, negotiation. Comforting people, giving people a kick up the bum when they need it, all that sort of stuff. So there's all those sorts of things that need to be done. Somebody else raised the point about BIM. It's going to be a public sector requirement in 2015, although somebody else said, well, how are they going to make us do it? But the whole legislative sort of framework in the UK needs to change, because there's a whole issue of liability for one project model. How does that work? How does single project insurance work? All that sort of stuff. And it needs to be bought into by the whole supply chain and everybody involved in the project, or it isn't going to work and be effective. And then finally, just a couple of things. Firstly, somebody else mentioned the BISRIO soft landings process, which is about ensuring a really good handover commissioning process and also feeding that lessons learned into the design and construction process. And actually, in Waite's experience, use of soft landings or something like that is good business, because a happy end user is a satisfied client. Satisfied client needs repeat business. So there's a learning loop there, and I think the whole thing about post-occupancy evaluation, tying into design management process, handover process, all those sort of things, there's some linkages there. And James raised a very interesting point for me, which I think really made me prick up my ears, which was about design managers on a project being the holders of the intellectual capital. Because it's a pivotal role, and it sits right in the middle of everything coming together from conception and design through to installation, manufacture and construction. And the design manager, if they sit all the way through that process, they have all those lessons and learning. And how can we disseminate that? Well, I think James got some experience of actually using BIM as a knowledge tool to actually pump that knowledge around the process. So, and one final thought before I just do a bit of structure is simply, take a building life of 100 years. We focus so much of our energy, time and money on the first few years of that timeline. But actually the real value is in the building over its life. The real cost is in the building over its life. And, you know, we need to be empowering the users, but we need to understand who they are to unlock that value. And I think there's a whole load of work that design management can do in this end of the process as well. Because I think design management pulls together things like designing for a low carbon economy, designing for better replacement and maintenance, all better user experience, all those sorts of things. So I think there's a bit of structure here in terms of process, in terms of tools, in terms of people skills, in terms of all the different aspects and drivers that feed into design management and affect the context in which we operate. I'm done.
Thank you.